So just bear with me whilst I sort a couple of things out. Wait for some people to join. So hello, I am indeed Bragi Magnarsson, and I am a Norse Viking storyteller, as well as many other things. So just forgive me whilst I'm just sort out a few things, make sure that where I am is safe. Oh look, I brought a drink, wicked. So what is this live stream about? This live stream is a live stream about a character on our channel called Dave the Viking Cat. And I'm going to talk about him and talk about the origin of Dave, where Dave came from. So hello, somebody watching already. So great, is that you, Ellie? So please do leave a comment and tell me where you are in the world. I've only got 2 likes. Yeah, so yeah, I did schedule this. I'm a little bit early. Sorry about that, but you know, I was ready to go, and the plans haven't quite gone to plan when it comes to having the option for letting people join. But I did not realise something today about this, that in order to let people join, you've got to do it in the vertical format. So I think probably the next live stream, that'll be tomorrow, because I'm trying to do a regular live stream every day now. And I know it's great being in the horizontal format. I will try to do one in the vertical format. You know, that's the international sign on YouTube of vertical and horizontal. So yes, but yeah, Dave the Viking Cat. So how did he come about? Who is Dave? And I think it's just fascinating to think that, you know, I'm developing behind the channel and showing you guys a digital host, because that's what fundamentally Dave is. And that's what I want Dave to aspire to be. And yes, I mean, I'm not brilliant at doing animation, and if you're trying to do animated stuff yourself, it can take an awful long time. And I really respect people that do animated stuff on YouTube, because some of it's really fantastic, and I do love a good cartoon. You know, I used to love watching the, you know, Spider-Man cartoons and the Batman cartoons and Scooby-Doo. So Dave is a fundamentally a digital character, and I'd love to have a cat. And call him Dave as well, but I don't think that will probably happen, but we'll see. You never know in life. Perhaps I should have a neighbour with a cat and befriend their cats and keep giving them cat treats. So Dave, yeah, so how did Dave come about? We've got 3 people watching, that's fantastic. And yeah, so Leonard Arola says, surprisingly, I was watching your video on the sword. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I made that a couple of weeks ago, and I'm hoping I got the right one selected, because I made 2 of them, both the same video, but one of them I ran through my editor and stabilised. So I'm hoping I've chosen the one that's stabilised or not stabilised. And but yeah, it's just a little bit, and it's an impromptu video where I didn't really have a script. I didn't really plan to film it, but as I was filming around that big stump, I thought, well, you know, I just decided just to film a bit of a close-up showing those 2 swords off, because, you know, and I got it somewhere here. Hang on a minute. Where are you? Hello, sword. And I've got a few swords. If you can see down here, look, I've got a pile of weapons. Now, somewhere within this pile of weapons is that sword. I've got to, you know, I don't actually know how many swords I own, to be fair. I'd have to guess, probably about 15. Maybe a few more. But yeah, so, you know, trying to not get away from the old subject of what this video is about. Dave the Viking Cat. So just read your comments. And I will interact with you as well. So I'm going to tell some folk stories about Dave. I'm going to make up some stories right here on camera. Because I've told so many stories and folk tales, and I really do think that's the most favourite thing I love to do, because I really do love telling the folk tales. I'm going to just adapt some folk tales I know and make them into Dave the Cat stories. And then, because I've made so many Dave the Cat stories in the last few weeks, I'm also going to tell you a few of them, including an exclusive Dave the Cat story, which is actually a crossover to another place in the universe. I'm not going to say too much. So let's go back to your comments. And Sam says, I've made it. Oh, yes, you've made it. And I really did enjoy your video about that little tiny spear. And I have begun to make a community post about it, but I just not want it through artificial intelligence and use psychology yet to make a local post. Because, yeah, I can write it myself. And I've done that a lot in the past. But I find that if I go to an AI and I say to it, improve this post by using cognitive dissonance and psychology to, then it will make a hook and make it a little bit more interesting. And then I can edit it afterwards just to make it more my own comment. And of course, that just saves me time. So, yeah, so lovely to see you, Sam. Lovely to see you, Leonard. And Sam says, were you able to finish your wooden club? No, I'm not finished it yet. I think I'm at least episode 5 or 6 in. I've got to edit episode 2 for next Friday. So my idea with that video series is to release it and publish it every Friday. So in my mind, maybe by the middle end of July, we'll have the club finished. And I've already got some nice willow to make a more centralised club, rather than having, that's going to be an offset club. So it's going to be, I had one earlier, there we go. So it's going to be a offset club. So you got the handle and then the club sticks out. So that's the general design. So I think on the next one I'm going to make, and I don't think I'm going to do it straight afterwards, I'll do it as another series, but I will start filming it. I'm going to make a more centralised stub. So the club is in the centre and the handle is in the middle going down. And I do have some nice willow, and I'm on the lookout to where I can possibly find a little bit of ash I could, get permission to take down and harvest. Because, it don't harm a tree if you chop a tree down and at the base, because most of the time it just pops back up. And this is very clearly the case with the famous tree that got sawn down last year in the Sycamore Pass, that famous tree, because it's now sprouting up, I do believe. So, it will come back alive, and in many years, it will be a big tree again. But ain't that a shocking whole event of how they chainsaw that tree down? And I did watch the highlights about the court case, about the 2 individuals that did it, and now we can technically talk about it. And at the time I did make a short video talking about it, but how shocking that is. I mean, why would you, what would make you want to go and chainsaw down such a legendary tree? Because I would have really loved in my lifetime to go and seen it. So I don't understand it. But we're going off subject. So lovely that we've got 3 people here. So Dave, so who invented Dave, and why did I call him Dave? And why do I think he's one of the best things we've got going on the channel? So back when I was filming in 2018, I came up with a story. I invented a story, a folk tale, because I've already told a few folk tales, because we started with Turkey, and at first when I started the channel, I was never going to really plan to be on the channel. That's not how I started it. I thought, well, Turkey will be the face, and because of his excellent storytelling, and I'll just be the voice and the hand behind the camera. But as we progressed in the filming, we kind of realised to myself that, well, actually, I like to have a go. So I filmed a video, and I think it probably slightly annoyed Turkey. I don't know if it did. This is just me thinking, because he probably saw himself as the face of the channel, and then I pop up and start doing things. And of course, because I live in the house where I film, I can go out and film whenever I want. So I started doing a few folk tales, and then of course Turkey quit the channel for whatever reasons. It doesn't really matter. I mean, as long as the guy's all right and he's good and he's well, that's fine with me. And I'm so thankful that he did all those videos. So I started doing the old folk tales, and whilst Turkey was here, I recorded 2 or 3 folk tales, including I think the first one was the one about Lund Church, and perhaps I could convert that to a Dave the Cat story in a few minutes for you, and give you the first folk tale I recorded, but convert it to Dave the Cat, because one of the advantages I've had because I've told so many folk tales, because I've told so many stories. And I used to do this on camp a little bit, because when you're reenacting and you're talking to the public, you are fundamentally telling them a story, aren't you? Let's face it, you're there dressed as a Viking, or maybe I'm dressed in my American Civil War gear. I'm telling them a story about the war, and that incorporates that ability and skill. And with me having that, problem when I grew up as a child, I had a speech impediment, which some days can probably pop through in a channel because I probably speak too fast still, which I can't help. And if you probably listen carefully, I'm not very good at my R's and my W's. Release Roderick. And I've never been very good at my R's and W's, even though I'm quite conscious about where I put my tongue in my mouth to try and get my R's and my W's correct. I've never quite got the hang of that. But it's all right, because that's just where I am. That's me, as in the free spirit of who I am. So along that line of storytelling, I created a story. I was lying in bed one night, and this folk tale popped in my mind called The Draugr of the Barrow. And and Dave didn't feature at that stage because this was still during the age of Turkey, as I call it. And I really enjoyed making this story up, and I recorded it and put it out. It's on the channel from 7 years ago, and we've filmed a lot of things. So I kind of had the thought to myself, well, yeah, actually, I quite enjoyed making that story up. And then I had that time between the beginning of 2018 and round about April when I couldn't decide what to do with the channel, because I was thinking, well, TK's left the channel, and it did annoy me at the time, because I felt like, well, you just quit the channel, and now what I'm going to do now, I thought, I had to make a decision. I had to decide what to do with Northworthy Sagas. Do I decide to just say sod it and delete the channel? I'm glad I didn't. Do I carry on my own, and or do I think about incorporating somebody else? And thank the gods, or whoever you may believe in, or whatever you believe in. I mean, thank that energy and the universe that I was lying in bed one night and I thought to myself, I know what to do. I'll invite Eggle, Simon, because we've been a good friend since the day I met him in 1999. So, I knew him for many, many years. And I've always enjoyed Simon's company. His middle name was Simon. His friends called him Si, Si Carter. And, of course, his Viking name was Eggle Thorson, of course, as you all know. And I don't know why he called himself Thorson. I think at the time of reenacting in the 90s or the 80s, everybody chose to have the surname of something associated with Thor, because everybody wanted to be associated with the god Thor. So that's probably why he had Thorson. And of course, he got Eggle because he was a massive fan of Eggle Skallagrimsson. So I thought, I invite Eggle. So, I sent him a few texts. I said, can I pop around? I used to go around and see him, and drink a bottle of wine with him. And I said, he said, all about what I've been doing with Turkey. He said, oh yeah, you told me about that. I said, how did that go? I said, well, going all right, so Turkey quit. And he kind of said to me, if I remember, I said, well, I'm not surprised by that really, because your competition and Graham or Turkey likes to be in charge to a certain degree. Whether that's true, I don't know. That was just Eggle's opinion. So I said to him, well, why don't you join me on the channel? And he snapped at the chance. So we got to the stage of what I call the Eggle and Bragi stage of the channel. And we started telling folk tales, because back in those days, in 2018 into 2019 and possibly into 2020, we were putting out 2 folk tales a week. We had a folk tale at Folklore Tuesday and Folklore Thursday and the hashtags. And of course, we made lots of mistakes in those days because we didn't do our good introductions. We'll be joining. Hello, I'm Eggle and I'm Bragi. And don't forget to go and subscribe. And don't forget to go and click the notification bell. And of course, we didn't use a hook. We didn't go, today's story is a brilliant story about, a Viking called Dave. He's going to get up some adventures. So we didn't have that ability, and we didn't learn that lesson at that point on the channel to know how to hook people in, which is something I'm still working at. I'm still working on that, whole premise of getting that first 30 seconds or your first few seconds in a shorts video to hook the viewer. And I think we are, and I probably hope you agree with me, that we are getting better at hooking the viewer. Let me just change the angle of the dangle on the phone. You can see my Farby ceiling. I'd love to at some point have a room like this and buy some good wood panels and panel it out, make it look like a proper longhouse, because that would be awesome. So I never understood that either. Why would even want to cut it down? No, I don't understand why they cut the tree down. And you saw the video. Have you seen the video that was put out, Sam, where the police highlighted this very dark video and you could hear them chainsawing it? And then one of the guys even took the wedge out. So, I mean, it's just crazy. And it's just disgusting. I mean, and I know a lot of people are like that about it. Some people will say, well, they shouldn't have gone to prison for chopping a tree down. And some people, which is probably where I stand, thinking, well, they need to be punished. You know, and, you know, they're going to be in prison for a long time just for chopping a tree down. But it's not the tree, it's the legacy and it's the thought and it's what it meant to people. You know, people have got married there, people have got proposed and engaged beneath that tree, people have lost loved ones and scattered their ashes around it. And of course, we all know that area from the Prince of Thieves, don't we, from the Robin Hood film. So yes, that's what makes you an individual, and I can't ever tell. Well, thank you. I mean, yes, I mean, I had a lot of speech therapy at school and I was always behind everybody else, which kind of made my education a little bit slower than most people. But ever since I left school, I read a lot. And, you know, if you go back to the day when I was 16, I had terrible handwriting. When I joined the American Civil War Society, I had a really nice old guy who taught me how to really write properly. So that was really good. And yeah, I mean, I get my words and language mixed up like most people. So let's go back to the Dave the Cat character. So me and Eggle were telling stories, and I said to him, you know, I think I made another story up. And then I said to him, you know, I was thinking in bed one night, probably. I do a lot of thinking in bed before I go to sleep, but I was thinking about, you know, a character. And many years before that, I was thinking about Dave the Viking Cat, thinking to myself, oh, well, having a cat character, a Viking, would be quite cool. So Dave the Cat was fundamentally invented many years before that, because I used to keep a regular diary, and I can definitely recall writing it in my diary saying, well, wouldn't it be a good idea to invent a story about a Viking cat? Because I kind of based Dave the Viking Cat on my cat called Charlie, and perhaps one day I'll do it. I think in a couple of videos there are some pictures. If you just type in cat on the channel and you go to the King of the Cat story, and I'll remember in a minute, I'll tell you that one as well. And I'm only live streaming until 8:30, because at 8:30 tonight I'm going to my local pub with a friend of mine for a beer, who's inviting me out. So let's just give you a heads up. So it'll be a 2-hour live stream. Yes, it will be a 2-hour live stream. But then again, I'll be on tomorrow. So, and I told Edgar about it, and he said, "Oh, that's a great idea." So then, I think I told the first Dave the Cat story in person, because that's how we fundamentally started the Dave the Cat stories. Then I had Eggle tell a few Dave the Cat stories, and I think one of them is actually a gnome for some reason, and he's Dave the Gnome. I don't know why that came about, because I think Eggle got a bit confused on camera. But you know, one of the characteristics of Dave is that actually he's a shapeshifter, because you know he's had all these adventures, and no doubt he's got a magical ring which gives him the ability to change shape. And that kind of ties in with the cartoons we're doing, when you sometimes see Dave, because the blooming AI gets him mixed up with a human being and makes him into a Viking warrior. Yeah. And then Sam says, I very much enjoy Dave the Cat. Yeah, and then, so how did they choose Dave? Well, Dave has always been one of those funny names, hasn't it? You know, there's always that saying, in life, everybody's got a friend called Dave. And yes, there was somebody in the Viking group called Dave, Wavy Dave, but I didn't base it on him. because he hasn't got any of the characteristics of Dave. So it'll just formally loose on the idea that everybody knows somebody or knows somebody that knows somebody called Dave. And I just thought, well, Dave sounds funny, doesn't it? You know, Dave, right there, Dave. And my brother, I got a brother called Dave or David. So, and although it's not based on my brother either, I'm not seeing in, you know, I've already seen twice in the last 13 years. I mean, what's all that about? Families, eh? I mean, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. But you can definitely choose a friendly cat to have in your life. But, you know, that's just the way it goes. And I do miss my brother David and my brother Stephen. And I hope they're okay in the world and having a good time. Because, you know, it's always good to be positive. And, you know, they was much older than me, so I often felt like a lonely child because there was adults by the time I was a child, and you know, with my other siblings being much older than me. But that's another story for another day. So I invented this character called Dave, and I kept talking to Edgar about it, and we were both saying, "Well, yeah, that sounds like a really good idea." So that is fundamentally the origin. I invented Dave, and then Eggle kind of came up with some characteristics. Because Eggle was always into writing, and he wrote a few things. Now, somewhere on my computer, I have all of Eggle's stories he wrote. He wrote a series of stories called Bolperman about this guy getting up to mischief around Derbyshire. And I think at some point, if I could figure out how to print them off, I'm going to read those stories on camera, because I think it's very important that those stories have a digital reality and are left, you know, as part of Eggle's legacy. Because, yeah, you know, if I could put out a new video every week from Eggle, because I must have between 100 and 150 long format videos I've never published and I've never edited still, but that would be gone in a year or maybe two. So that's why I try to put out one new video a month on the 9th. And we're coming up in a couple of days to the next Eggle Thorsson Day. So, you know, he kind of developed the character, and he kind of said to me, you know, so where did Dave learn to talk? And I said, well, I'm not sure about that. And this is talking about the origin story. And I think this will be the first one I'm going to tell in a minute. And how I'm going to do it is because I've not fundamentally made the story yet, as in all the details. But I know enough about the idea and the concept of the origin story to tell it to you today. So just go back to your comments. And then Leonard said, self-publishing is a good idea. Well, definitely so, because I think last year when I was thinking more about Dave, I kind of came up with a concept for a series of books. And I think having some books published about Dave would be a really good idea. And then I did some brainstorming with an artificial intelligence writing aid, and we kind of developed the idea into a much bigger idea, which I don't want to give away yet what I'm planning to do with Dave, but it's a very big thing. And yeah, we may go down this whole publication route, and then we could either do it as a digital format. I mean, what would you want me to do? Would you want to be able to buy a physical book, or would you want me to make a digital book, or do both? So that's another concept we've got to think about. And I've got to think about the intellectual property developments of him. And I got enough evidence and proof that Dave exists and we invented him, so that's good and that's protected. So I got to go down that route as well, because I often think about, you know, what's the best thing we've got going on the channel? You know, is it the history videos? Is it the funny short videos? And every time I think about it, I just come to the concept that actually it's actually Dave. Did you see that Facebook notification there? I'm very curious to know that when I'm live streaming and I forget to, well, you always have to be on Wi-Fi on a live stream, but I got to figure out somehow how to turn on notifications. Does that pop up on my live stream? So yeah, so we're definitely going to think about, you know, promoting Dave. And yes, I did make some merchandise the other day, but I made a massive mistake when I set up the shop. I selected the wrong blooming country, and I selected America instead of the UK. And apparently now I've been looking into it, how to change it. I've got to start a new shop. So I got to go through that whole process again. I mean, slap my hand. I must learn my lesson there because I made a big mistake. So I had to disconnect the current shop so I can start again in the next few days. So just bear with me, and that'll give me a few more hours to make some more logos and work on that. So, you know, we all make mistakes. As my dad would say, you know, if you've not made a mistake, son, you've done nothing in your life. But the thing about making a mistake, and the most important thing, is you learn from that lesson. You know, and I'll make mistakes. I've made mistakes this week. I've made mistakes the week before. And I'm going to no doubt make mistakes next week. I don't try to envision myself as being this perfect human being. I know I get some lovely comments, and I had some recently saying, "Oh, you're a great man," but I'm not. I mean, I'm only just like anybody else in the world, and I do struggle, you know, like everybody else. And so books, then graphic novels, then movies, and close it with a TV series. You read my mind. Say no more. You know, I think you know, a big TV channel beginning with a letter N, and I think, you know, that could be wonderful. And at the meantime, I'm just using the AI tool I've got on my phone, which is CapCut. It's got a new feature. That's why I've been able recently to make those Dave the Cat cartoons, and I must say they're very funny. And yeah, you mean I get a little bit fed up with you know, perhaps we could have called Dave the Norse cat, and we may not get so many people with horns on the head or horns on the helmet. I mean, what was that about? But then again, it's a fantasy, and it's not so fundamentally meant to be stripped. And that's a good point, that. How am I going to find out what time it is when I got to go out? Yeah, so I'll get to about 1 hour 50, and I've got to check the time. So, yeah, then Leonard Cohen has agreed. Yeah, and then Sam says, I believe if you were to put it all together in the right way, this would make a great children's book. Yes, I agree with you. I mean, my mother, my late mother, Kathleen was her name, used to go to psychics, you know, and get, you know, a reading about the future. And one of the things one of the psychics said about me is that one day I'm going to be a novelist and a writer, and I'll be associated with the colour blue. But it's quite interesting. I mean, we've got some blue here. That the most attractive colour when it comes to YouTube is actually blue. So have a blue background, and I think the next colour is red. Those are the two colours that really attract people. And then Leonard says, I believe in about 5 years or less, people will be able to pay to produce full movies with SI, with artificial intelligence. Well, yeah, I think that's going to be. It depends how quickly we get AGI, artificial general intelligence. And at the moment, I think what's really we're struggling with is the ability for memory space and the ability for the computers to compute. You know, in these massive warehouses they have. And it's quite interesting how some of them are being built under the sea now because they realise that cools down all the heat. And then the ability to have the memory space. So we need to evolve that as well before we can evolve AI. But, you know, you go back a year ago and what AI could do then to now is fascinating. And I saw a good comparison about this when it comes to video graphics, where 2 years ago they had a video of Will Smith eating spaghetti. You know, you could tell it made mistakes. Then you saw the next video from last year and it looked awful lot better. And then the video very recently out on this new AI app, and it looks so much like real life. It's unbelievable. And you know, and certainly with some of the pictures, because now what I'm doing with the caption competitions, instead of looking for created common pictures on the internet, I'm just making them up on AI. And some of those pictures you'll think, well, actually, I've been made on camp. I've actually been at a re-enactment event. They're that good. There's that one this week of the picnic. That's an artificial intelligence picture, that is. And you wouldn't think so, would you? And of course, what you could also do, you can get an original photograph. So, you know, you got some Normans and you upload that to AI and it will make a new version of it. And I did upload a funny AI video of a medieval man with one foot in the air earlier, which I thought was a comical picture. And then I saw on Sora today, the app I use from Google, and is it ChatGPT, I think? I don't know if Google are behind it, I'm not sure. But I saw one of Mount Rushmore with some new heads. So I made one with the classical Viking figures at Mount Rushmore because I thought that was quite good. Yeah. So the origin story of Dave the cat. So many years ago, in fact, in the modern age, you know, in the 21st century, and maybe it's Derby, maybe it's London. I've not decided the location yet. There was a family, and, you know, the family, you know, man and husband, and they had 2 kids, a young child, you know, a daughter and a boy, girl and a boy, and they had a cat, a ginger cat, and his name was Dave. And Dave, you know, he was a mischievous cat. You know, go and chase birds, and you know, he would climb onto the neighbour's roof, and you know, sunbathe, and go around the neighbours and get fed extra food because cats are good at that. And he used to go wandering and go looking at places. You know, cats do. They love to wander and look. I know, you'll go to the local pond and try to pull out some fish and chase frogs and do all sorts of catty things. And he had a very good home and a good family who loved him dearly. And he was a very big and brave tomcat. And one day he was out, and they lived next door to a wood. At the back of their house was an old wood and a park, an old country park that goes back, well back in time to the Saxons. And, you know, Dave was wandering, looking around, climbing trees, chasing pigeons and blackbirds, you know, trying to chase a robin. And sometimes he caught them and brought them back to the house as a gift. Cats do that. But one day he was out and something a bit strange happened. For he was looking around a tree, an old oak tree, really old, you know, easily 500 years. And he saw a little mouse that was running around it. Well, Dave being a cat, and let's face it, when you think about cats, we think about mice and cats, don't we? Tom and Jerry. He thought, oh, I'm going to get this mouse and take him back to my mum and dad, you know. And at some point I'll give them names. I think it's important to give them names. And so he tried to chase the cat around the tree, the mouse. And then the mouse went down a hole underneath the tree. One day he thought, oh, I got you now. He started to paw away to get at the mouse, and a load of leaves came out, and he made a big enough hole he could climb in. He thought, oh, that's it, you know, I'm going to climb in this hole, you know, as cats do, and go and get this mouse, you know, I may eat him or I may take him back to my mum and dad. So he climbed in this hole, but this hole got bigger and bigger and bigger. And he went on going further down. He thought, where's this mouse? You know, you heard a squeak, 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 squeak. You know, you heard the sound of the mouse. That's what mice sound like. And he went further down until eventually he got so far down and it got quite steep. He started to fall and slide down, and he couldn't stop himself. You know, and there he was, you know, trying to put all 4 paws out, trying to stop himself from sliding down this into the hole. And suddenly he fell into a big chamber, like a big cave. But it was no ordinary cave, because it was all made of stone, and not just natural stone, it was worked. There was pillars, and, you know, there was a stone roof and stone walls and stones on the floor that had fallen down. He thought to himself, well, what's this place? Of course, we know it to be an old ruin, you know, probably goes back way back in time. Maybe it's Roman, maybe it's an Anglo-Saxon crypt. Not decided that yet. And so, you know, Dave was looking around this old stony underground place. It was in fact a temple. Of course, Dave isn't an archaeologist and doesn't know much about history. I mean, Dave's never sat down and read a book yet. I mean, can Dave read? There's a thought. I don't not really thought about that so far. Oh, that's an idea. You know, I could have a story about Dave reading a book. So there he was, you know, looking around, thinking, well, where's this mouse? Because that's the first thing on his mind, was to find the mouse. He didn't care that he was well underground in this old big temple, old stone chamber, and it was big. You know, he looked at the pillars and he thought, oh, I've never seen things that tall before in my life. But then he kept on going forward, and it opened up into another big room. And there was like seating all the way around of stone. And at the back was a big standing stone. And he saw the mouse there, and he ran up. And he jumped, tried to jump on the mouse. But something a bit strange happened, because when he jumped, his two paws landed on this old pillar, this old stone. And it started to light up in all these weird designs and shapes. And suddenly, something very strange and supernatural happened. For this pillar was in fact a portal, a way back into the past. And it sucked Dave in, because the force and the magic from it was so fierce and strong. And because Dave was only a small cat, he could not stop himself from being sucked through this time portal. And of course, you know, he went through this thing, and a few minutes later he found himself in a big wood. You know, he looked around, he thought, wow, where am I? I don't know where I am. I've never been here before. And of course, this wood was not where he lived down south. It was in Mercia. For not only had he travelled in time back to the 9th century, he also travelled through space as well, and travelled back to an old wood. It was a wood, it was called Shining Cliff. A very old wood near me, in a valley that was called Ambergate, the Ambergate Valley. Some people say it's called that because if you dig down deep enough, you find amber. And some people say it's named that because of all the people that made beer and mead, and that is why it's called the Ambergate Valley. But that's another story for another day. So Dave was in this wood, and of course, being a cat, he did not know that he had gone back in time. He just thought something a bit weird happened and he's now back on the land above him. But that wasn't true. But something else happened. Because when he got up, because he was lying on the ground when he had kind of appeared there and stayed, he could walk on two legs. He thought, whoa, you know, walking about, this has never happened before. But normally I walk around on all four paws. But now I'm walking around on two legs. Oh, this is weird. And then he saw a bird. He said, hello, bird. And then he actually, in shock, I've just spoken. And of course, not only had he travelled in time, but it also changed him into a supernatural spiritual animal where he could talk and walk. I'm sure you agree, that's an amazing thing. And so, you know, he started to walk around. There was nobody there. He thought, well, if this is the wood where I live, my house should be over there. So he walked back in the right direction, but of course, it wasn't where he lived. It was in this massive wood. You know, that's just in the middle of nowhere. And he got a bit scared. He thought, well, what's going on here? And then on the ground near another tree, he found a little pouch. And in it, there was a few things. You know, somebody's left it behind, hanging up on a branch, and it was hanging on the tree. And there was a little flint and steel, what we use in the Dark Ages, the medieval times, and make a fire. And without even knowing he made a fire, he thought to himself, oh, how do I know to do that? I've never made a fire before, and it was getting dark, it was getting late, and it was cold, even though Dave was a furry cat. So he made a fire. You know, he walked over to some twigs and brought them back. Found a bit of a log, he brought that back. Before you know it, he was toasty and warm, sitting around this fire with his paw stroking his chin, thinking, "Oh, what's going on here? This is very strange. I can now talk," and words popped in his head. "I can walk." And he looked in the pouch, and there was a little set of clothes, a little pair of trousers, and a little tunic. And he thought, "Well, I'm a bit cold. Why don't I put these clothes on?" So he did. He got a pair of trousers. He put them on. International sign for putting trousers on. He put the belt around. He fastened that up. I'd never worn trousers before. What would Mum and Dad think? We'll go back wearing trousers. Of course, cats don't really wear clothes. Well, not often. Well, they do, but only by the owners putting them on. And then he got the little tunic, and he got his little arms up. He put his arms in and put it over his top. And then within that pouch was a small, tiny sea axe, a small knife, and had two little leather loops. And he thought, "Oh, wait a minute, I could put that on my boat, on my trousers." So he did that as well. They thought, you never know what's out in these woods. There could be some bigger cats or some even worse dogs. Dave don't like dogs. So, he had a little knife to defend himself. And he thought, well, I'm all alone. It's dark. And I don't know what to do. I can talk. I can walk. And something's not quite right, he says. Something feels off. He could feel it in his cat bones. And, that something was off. And what he knew, or didn't know, was that it was back in time. Back in the medieval age. Well, then in the distance, he heard some kind of rustling and movement in the woods. I thought, "Oh, what's that? Oh, I hope it's not a big dog." Well, it wasn't. You'll find out what it was in a minute. And then he got louder and louder. And then he put his paw to his ear. He listened up. "Oh, wait a minute. That sounds like somebody walking." And he got louder and louder. Now, Dave didn't know what to do. He thought, "Well, shall I climb a tree and hide?" He thought, "No, I'm going to be a brave cat. I'm going to be courageous. I'm going to sit by my fire. And whatever comes, I'm going to deal with it. I got a knife. I can defend myself. Now I've got the ability to use a knife. I can talk. I can reason with somebody or another animal. And, in worst case, I'm very fast on my two legs. I could always run off. Or even on two legs or four legs." And this creature got closer and closer and closer. The footsteps became thuds, thud, thud, branch break, leaves rustling, until in the distance you saw a shadowy figure. It was a short figure, about 5 foot 5 inches high, and a stocky man. He was coming over to the fire. He thought, "Well, what am I going to do here?" So, "Well, I'll be brave. If the person comes over, I'll say hello. I can't do any fairer than that. And if I'm in danger, I can run off and hide." To save himself. He didn't want to run off and hide because Dave isn't a coward. He's a very brave and courageous cat. But let's face it, if you're very confused and you don't know where you are, and you just learnt to talk and walk and wear clothes, you're going to be a little bit worried and a bit scared. And so, the figure got closer and closer until he could see a face. And on the face was a massive load of hair in the shape of a moustache. And I think you know where I'm going. And so his figure got closer until the figure was a few meters away. And he looked down. And he saw Dave the cat. And he goes, "Hey up me duck." This was a local saying around here. And of course, that figure, that man, that stranger, was Egil Thorson, the late and great Viking and our fallen brother. And he says, "Oh, hello. That's a bit funny. You're wearing clothes. You're a cat." And Dave stood up and said, "Hello, my name's Dave." And Egil looked startled and jumped back. Said, "Am I hallucinating?" "Say that again," he says. I said, "Hello." Dave put his paw out. "I'm Dave." "Oh, I'm a cat and I need some help. I don't know where I am, and for some reason I can talk now and walk." Well, Eggle sat down by the fire and he says, "Well, I'm a Viking, I'm a Norse warrior, and where you come from?" And Dave said, "Well, I come from a place where we got cars and TVs and stuff like that, and houses." And Eggle was very confused because, as a Norse warrior, he had no idea what a TV was or what a car was. It was a foreign language. You may as well be talking Frankish as far as Eggle was concerned. And Eggle said, "Well, don't you know where you are?" And he said, "No." I said, "I've looked around this wood and I can't figure out where I am. I don't recognise it." He said, "You're in Mercia." So, "Mercia," said Dave. What's Mercia? Is it a person?" And Eggle said, "No, it's a place. You know, it's of course these days us Norse warriors have taken over. So Mercia is a thing of the past, really, beyond the Danelaw, and in the 9th century." So what do you mean, said Dave, the 9th century? So what? I mean, what I mean. You know, this is, 846 AD. Dave was startled. "Do you mean it's not 2025? What do you mean Eggle says 2025? Well, that's where I lived at the time." And Eggle thought to himself and thought, "Well, something a little bit supernatural is happening here. I think you're from the future." Because Dave was talking to him, and Eggle was very bright. And so what happened? And then Dave explained the story about going down a hole and ended up in this massive, stone place and going through this stone like pillar with all these carvings, and then suddenly waking up in this wood and finding a pouch, which was probably provided by the gods themselves. So Dave had protection. And then, Eggle says, "Well, I can't leave you out here on your own when you're a talking cat. I've travelled all throughout, I've been to Norway and Denmark and all over the world, and I've never met a talking cat before." And I said, "I'm a kind old Viking." I said, I think you must come with me, and we must, go back to where I come from, and I'll train you the ways of the Viking." So this is what happened. The next morning, Eggle had, a nice cloak and a little extra bit of wool in his pouch, and gave that to Dave for a cloak so he could sleep in it. Eggle explained what a Viking was, and he had a sword and an axe and a shield. So this is my shield. I use this to protect myself, and this is my spear. And I'm a wealthy Viking, Norse warrior. Viking is my way of life. I go a Viking, but I'm a Norse warrior, and I'm quite famous throughout the land because everybody's heard of the great Egil Thorson. And this is what we do. We go pillaging, and we go on raids, and we have adventures, and we'd like to drink mead. Dave says, "What's mead?" "Oh, it's made from honey," he says. "Oh, we have to come back and try some, Dave." So Dave and Egil went back to Northworthy, which was, a few leagues away down south in South Derbyshire, as it is today. And Ambergate Valley is, it's about 20 miles that direction. And there's a lovely place, and Shining Cliff is actually a wood. I'll have to take you there one day and tell you a story and show you where Dave ended up in the 9th century. And so, Dave went back. On the way back, they went down a road and they passed some people, and they're like startled. "What's this, Egil? It's a cat. It's walking and wearing clothes." And he said, "Well, this is a cat of the gods. This is, this is one of the Azir, one of the Viking gods, And then Egil says, "Perhaps he's a shapeshifter and he can't get out of the cat shape at the moment." So people saw Dave and they were amazed and startled. I think you would be, wouldn't you? If you was walking down the road in the wood or in the field, and you came across, a Viking with a walking, talking, clothes-wearing cat, you would be amazed. And I certainly would be. And so eventually, Egil and Dave got back to Egil's longhouse, it was a pretty popular longhouse because Egil used to love having parties, and there's always going to be shield maidens round. And of course, Egil had children all grown up by them who had left and travelled the world, the known world. And so, Egil felt responsible to train Dave how to be a Norse warrior. And in fact, Egil became, Dave's dad. And, Dave looked up to Egil. Well, I love you, Dad. I love you. Called him Egil. I love you, Egil. And then he introduced two characters to Dave, which were myself, because, I was fundamentally Egil's sworn brother. And then he introduced him to another character called Eirik. And we became Dave's uncles. And we swore from that day to always look out for Dave and make sure he was protected. But of course, Dave being Dave and being a magical super cat, he didn't really need protection, really. And then he became a legend in his own right. People will come up to him and say, hey, up, you're Dave the Viking Cat. I've heard about you. I'm from Londinium, or I'm from Elfwick in York, and I've heard about you. People have told stories in London, or Londinium, about this walking, talking Viking way of living cat. And so people would hire him, somebody would come up and say, oh, I've had my gold stolen. Can you come and help me? And then Dave would go and quest. So that is the fundamental origin story of how Dave came about and became a Norse Viking warrior, magical and mysterious, but super cat. And I hope you enjoyed it. And although I know the premise of the story, I've literally made that up on camera for you. So let's just go back to your live messages. If the live stream does go off, just let me know, because I did have a problem yesterday with the live stream at the end of it cutting off. And then Leonard said, we have a Siamese old girl called Fat Chicken. Oh, that's a cool name. And then Sam says, don't feel bad, I'm really dyslexic and it messes with me every day. But 40 years old, I guess it doesn't really matter. Well, no, because when you think about Egil Thorson, he was dyslexic. But yet he had a degree in archaeology from York University, one of the well-known and best universities in the UK, if you don't count, Oxford or Cambridge, which are the two elite universities, and some of the ones in London. But yes, and he said to me, I got dyslexia, Andy, but I never let it stop me. I never let it, hold me back. And yes, I struggle to read at times and I get words mixed up, but I don't let it stop me. And you should never let it stop you. And then Sam says, it's funny because I have my cat Nubs. He's a Manx, and I was going to do a children's book with him, and a young boy on a pirate ship, he was going to be Captain Nubs. Oh, well, I could always create a story on the channel for you of Captain Nubs, the Viking pirate cat. Would be quite cool. And perhaps we could co-author it together, Sam. Once we get Dave established, we could work on that together, if you like. And then because I've already been down that route, then I'm going to have that ability to do that for you. And then Shine Your Light says, so hello, Shine Your Light. I just want to say thank you for last night. It was an amazing adventure. We went out doing the typical Norse and Viking thing. We went pillaging, legal pillaging, where we go and look through dumpsters, and we found a lot of food and some cool items that had been thrown away into skips and waste bins. And that was another brilliant night. And I've had some of the food today. I got about 40 packets of crisps. So I'm not going to have to buy crisps for a while. Although my toothache was played up a little bit earlier. So I had to take some painkillers because I got my wisdom tooth popping up. And at some point, I'll have to think about covering how they dealt with dentistry in the medieval age. Which was often the case of getting a wire, a metal wire, normally of iron, and you heat it up until it's bright white, and then just shove it in your tooth to kill the pain. Which, I'm sure you agree, is a very brutal thing. Not a nice experience. And then they had the ability to take teeth out as well. And of course, throughout the later medieval age, that sort of thing progressed, but they also had the ability to use herbs as well, and they knew what plants you could chew to stop pain. So what time are we on? So we've got to be on about 7:30. So I don't have a watch, and of course I think, oh, I'm going to check my mobile phone, but I'm using it. You know. And it says that story is ace. Yeah, and it's fundamentally, that's the premise of the story I made up some time ago. I just got to work on the detail a little bit more. And then at some point I got to think about having all the stories in order. And then I have actually created a Dave the Viking Cat channel. If you just type in Dave the Viking Cat, you'll find a channel called, which has got his own channel now. But so far, I've not got around to publishing videos because I'm still working on the metadata and the SEO data, and I've got to create a banner. I'm not very good at creating banners. We did have somebody make us a banner and sent me an email, but I'm not managed on my PC to get it to fit our banners yet because it's too small. So I'm hoping I can put it on my phone if I remember. I've just been way too busy and I get distracted way too easily. So, and then Ledrick says, this was good. Great show, my man. So Dave the King of Cats. Now, the King of Cats is an old medieval folk tale. I think it was first recorded in either the 14th or 15th century and was written down in, I think, the 16th century during the Elizabethan age. But I'm going to adapt it. I'm not told this story as a Dave the Cat story. So I'm going to adapt it right now, live on camera. So a long time ago, in the medieval age, where the Saxons and the Vikings and the Norse warriors lived, the Norse were a Viking. That was their way of life they lived. And what a great way of life. I mean, we don't really have anything the equivalent do in the modern age. We don't go, oh, I'm going, well, I suppose we do, but yeah. So there was a village. And in the village, it had an old Anglo-Saxon church. And there was 2 old men with wooden spades were digging a grave. As you do. Somebody's died in the village. Got to give them a good burial, in a wooden coffin. So they were digging a hole with a wooden spade. And then suddenly, they heard some bells, like a sound of bells, but not like the church bell, but like small bells. Oh, what's that? I don't know. That's a bit weird, isn't it? Said the other guy. And they carried on digging, and every other minute or so, they heard like footsteps, and they heard bells, and then they heard a voice. Yay to the King of Cats! And the bells rang. Ding, ding, ding. I've got a bell somewhere in here, but I don't know where it is. And then more footsteps. And the 2 men were looking a bit confused. What's that? They said. I don't know. Not heard that before. The other guy said, you don't think it's a ghost, do you? No, I've never heard a ghost in this churchyard. They carried on digging the grave. And again, footsteps, bowl sounds, and a voice going, yay to the King of Cats. And the men looked around again. Did you hear that? Yeah, I definitely heard it this time. Oh, that's a bit spooky, that is. One of the guys says, and they're both old men with big white beards. Do you think someone's playing a prank? Well, who would do that? So we've been digging graves here for 40 years or more. I've never heard a noise like that before, he says. The other guy stood up. One of them was in the grave. The other guy got out of the grave. And I was digging and had a look round. Whoa, he said, the other guy was called Bert. I don't know why, but let's call him Bert. So, hey up, Bert. I said, I can't see anything. And again, they carried on digging. And they heard the noise again. Thud, thud, thud. The ringing of bells. Ding, 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 ding. And they heard a little voice go, yay to the King of Cats. Did you hear that voice? He said, yeah, said Bert. Something about the King of Cats. I've never heard that before. What's the king of a cat? I mean, I've heard about our king in England, but I've never heard about a cat king. Then they carried on digging, but they carried on hearing this noise. Thud, 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 ding, 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 yay to the king of cats. And then suddenly, at the bottom of the graveyard, they saw some tiny figures. And Bert says, have you seen that down there? And the other guy says, yeah, well, it's not a ghost, is it? Is it some sheep? No, it's not sheep. And what's that they're carrying on the shoulders? You know, Bert had a look. He had better eyesight than the other guy. That looked like a coffin. Of course, they heard a thud, 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 ding, ding, ding. And again, the voice went, yay to the king of cats. Well, at this point, the two old men, the grave diggers, well, they got a bit scared and they decided to run off. They dropped the spades and ran off. I said, I'm not staying around here with that. I don't know what it is. And I've heard about some spooky things in my time. He said, do you reckon it's the Draugr, the undead? I'm not going to stand around here, said Bert. I'm going back. You know, so they went back, run off. I went to the Mead Hall and I went in and looking scared and startled. And one of the warriors at the back saying, what's going on with you two? And they told the story. So, there we were. You know, old Elfric, you know, he died, didn't he? Oh, yeah, that's sad, isn't it? But he lived a good life. We've been digging his grave, you know, for tomorrow. When we've got the local priest coming round to give him a good burial. Because at this point in time, there was Christians, you know. They'll say no more. And so they told him about this thudding noise. He said, we heard some funny noises. He said, we thought it was a ghost at first. We don't know what it is. But it went thud, 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 like footsteps. And quite a few footsteps. And then we heard like a ringing bowl. Ding, 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 ding. And then we heard a little voice going, yay to the king of cats. And, you know, all the men and the women gathered round and said, well, what's all that about? And then they carried on saying, and it happened again. And another minute, you know, a few moments later, because in those days we didn't have minutes or hours. You know, it was morning, afternoon, and of course, morning is a fascinating word itself. And of course, the concept of time hasn't been invented yet. You know, it was, and the same with seasons and months to a certain degree. And so they said, well, you know, every few moments we heard it getting louder, and we heard definitely footsteps, and then we heard, you know, the bowls, ding, 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 went the bowls. A little tiny bowl, not loud bowls, not like the church bowl, no, little, very quiet, but you could hear them, because let's face it, a bowl noise is very unique. A bit like a, you know, I suppose it could say it's a bit like this. There we go, we've got a prop. Always have a prop when you saw it telling a story. He said, we kept hearing that. And then we heard a voice going, yay to the king of cats. And it happened again. Thud, thud, thud. Yay to the king of cats. As my singing Dana sings. And it got louder and louder until the stage where we saw these little figures. And there was a little figure in front. And I think he was the one going, yay to the king of cats. And then we saw these 8 figures carrying a coffin. And then behind them was some more figures ringing bowls. Well, you know, I mean, I'm brave and I don't mind fighting, you know, the Vikings and the Norse, but I'm not staying around for something like that. That's spooky, he says. He said, I think it's the undead, said Bert. And the other guy said, no, I don't think it's the undead, you know. I think it's some kind of, you know, a ghost. You know, and everybody started laughing at him. Ah, you two have had too much meat today and you're drunk. And then one of the guys said, well, have you been eating some funny bread? You know, and what we mean by that is, you know, that we've had some bread made from wheat and it's been affected with ergot of rye. Some of them thought, well, perhaps they're hallucinating and they're seeing things. But that was not the case, because they were, in fact, seeing cats. And there was a cat at the front. and in his hand he had a crown. And then there was 8 cats carrying a coffin on their shoulders. And behind them was another 8 cats, and they each had a bow, and then tuna going, marching forward. And then the other cat at the front was going, yay to the king of cats. Well, in this mead hall, Anglo-Saxon mead hall, no doubt later down the line the Vikings will come and take it over and drink all the mead, because that's what we do. Yay! Let's just kick out the Saxons and get the mead. Oh yes, every time. That's a win-win for us. In the back of this mead hall was a big ginger cat. And his hair's perked up at this. Because although he couldn't speak like Dave, and it was Dave, he thought, well, I've heard about this. And so at the back, there was Dave. Some people say it wasn't Dave. Some people said it was Dave, because that is a mystery for you to decide. He perked up. He thought, oh, I've heard about this. The king of the cats. I've heard about him. He's that cat who lives, way down south in Wessex. He's the king of all the cats. Because all the cats, they had a king and they had a fellowship. And of course, Dave wasn't like them, because Dave could talk and walk and drink mead. And of course, Eggle was there and I was there. And Dave says, I know what that's about, he says. The king of the cats has died. Eggle said, what do you mean the king of the cats? I said, I've told you, I got talking to a cat because he can still meow and talk to cats in meow language. He said, he told me one time, he told me a story when I was hanging about with this cat, probably a female cat. Dave was probably having a good time. And, cats are cats and they like to do that sort of thing. He said, she told me all about the king of cats. He said, down south in Wessex, they've got their own little kingdom. And there's a king of the cats. He's got a crown. There he is. And whenever they die, they always bring them back to Northworthy, but now called Diarleby, because what it was later called. Because we're at the time in Northworthy history when the Vikings and the Norse were about to take over, and Eggle was a Viking warrior, but he was like a spy living in the village. But that's another story itself. And of course, you don't wear your Thor's hammer. You pretend to wear a Christian cross. And as far as the Saxons are concerned, we're not Norse warriors, we're Christians, but we're just pretending. And so, it says, Dave stood up and said, well, there's got to be a new king. And then suddenly, at the back of this mead hall, where they got an open window, the cat with the crown jumped over into the mead hall. And he came up to Dave and he said, tell Dave, I've been told that Cedric III is dead. And now you are king of the cats, for you have been elected by all the cats. Because you, Dave, are the most mightiest cat around. And so I hand you this crown. And that was how Dave actually became the king of the cats. So not only was he a magical warrior cat, he was also a king. And lovely story. Right. So how's the live stream doing? I know we're down to one person at the moment. I hope we're not lost connection. I know if I do this on my phone, I can have a look and make sure I got internet. And I got somebody add me back. I've had a few people add me on Facebook. So, yeah, I still got internet signal. Let me just back out of that and go back to that. So Dave the cat and the troll. So many of the things that Dave did, he travelled, because Dave was a very curious cat. And hey, says Shiny Light. And Dave, he travelled the known world. And one day he was by the coast, and he got talking to an old Viking sailor. and said, well, I'm just preparing to, a Norse warrior. He said, I'm just preparing a crew. We're going to sail to Norway. Why don't you come along, Dave? And end of the season, we're going to come back to, England, or Angleland, as it was called, Englander. We're going to come back, but we've got some, some business to do some trading. But why don't you come over? Come back to the homeland of Norway, and you can come and stay in my longhouse. And so, Dave agreed to do this. You thought, well, not every day you meet somebody and they invite you to Norway, is it? And Dave, being a curious cat, and cats are very curious, he decided that yes, I'll take your offer. So the next day, he stayed with this guy who remains nameless. Perhaps his name is Thorolf. Who knows? He met the crew. They went down to this little inlet where on the beach they had the longship, and all the crew were amazed. One of the guys stood forward. Hey, you're Dave the Viking Cat. I've heard about you. You're a legend. And everybody was really happy. All these Norse warriors, they was all going back to trade, because we had good stuff in England, and they had a lot of nice wine and some good mead and furs, and they're going to trade it back to Norway and then bring more stuff back from Norway, more furs, more silver, more coin. And maybe on the way back they may go and raid Francia or somewhere like that, or one of the Germanic tribes that was still around in the day. And so they sailed off, and this was the first time that Dave went on a longship. And he got to Norway, and he went and he stayed with a family, and this family was made up of husband and wife and 2 sons. Well, Dave actually stayed there for a while, a few seasons. He disappeared from England and from Derby because Dave was really magical like that, and he decided to stay with his family. But this family, they had a lot of land, and on the land they had a massive wood, a massive forest. But the family and the old man, he was an old Norse warrior by now. He's done his pillaging. He's long in the beard. He's had a good life. But he had a problem. And his problem was he was in debt. He owed money to people. Because, it's great, you got land, but land doesn't always give you money. And the land wasn't the best land to grow crops on. They survived and they managed to get by. But he couldn't quite get enough silver and gold to pay the debts off to another landowner. And he didn't want to lose some of his land. And I'm sure you agree, if you got land, keep hold of it. It's never a true saying. Pass it down to your next generation, to your sons. And in those times, it would always be passed to the oldest son. I mean, that's a very old medieval tradition. And normally, if you've got land, the next, your son would build a longhouse high up in the valley, because the high up land in the valley is not so good as the soil in the bottom of the valley. And then eventually, when the generation that live in the bottom of the valley passed away, when they're old, the son would move down into his father's longhouse, and then he would have children, and they would move into his old longhouse up in the valley. But that's not happened yet. For the old man was still there, and he had a nice big hall, and in the centre of the hall he had a big chair which he sit on, and no doubt he would grab an axe and have an axe on the chair, and always have one ready, because you never know, do you, in those days. And so he called his oldest son. He said, son, we got a problem. We've got to pay the debt off this year. So I want you, tomorrow, to go and get your axe. I'll put it back too soon, didn't I? And go into the forest over there. And go and chop down some trees and make a load of logs. And then we can go and get the horse and cart and take them to market and make some charcoal from some of it and make enough money to pay our debt off. And the son says, yes, father, I will do that. So the next morning, he got up when the sun came up, and he saw his mother and said, "Here, son, here's some bread and here's some cheese." And he got himself a leather bag to put it in. You know, he put it over his shoulder with his good axe. He went off. He had the bread and cheese in here. Oh, I love bread and cheese. And he went off. It took him a few hours to walk to the wood because he hadn't got a lot of land. But as I say, they was in debt and they did not want to have to sell the land, because if you keep the land, you keep your wealth and you can pass it on to your next generations, to your sons, and it will carry on to their sons and their sons. You know, and many generations, you know, they'll get to the modern age and they've still got the land. And that has happened, you know, from the medieval age all through all these centuries. People have kept the same land. And so, you know, he came to the wood and started walking through the wood, and at the back of the wood there were some good old oak trees, and that was the wood he was after. You know, they're 100 years old. He thought, well, yeah, that's good enough for me. I'll go to that bit of land, bit of wood, and there's a bit of a clearing in the centre where he could store the logs. So he got his axe out and started to chop down the trees. You know, all the time, Dave the Viking Cat was back home in the longhouse with the family. And he comes into his story in a few minutes. And so the oldest son was chopping down trees. He spent all morning and all afternoon. But then suddenly, in the distance, he heard a thud noise. Very loud footsteps. And then the tree started to shake and wave and move. He thought, what in the Holheim is going on here? You know? And suddenly, through the wood, appeared a mighty troll, a big troll, as big as a tree. One of those, you know, Norwegian giant trolls. Not like the Swedish trolls, who are more man-shaped in size. No, one of these ginormous trolls, you know, high as a good average tree. And the troll looked down at the man, the oldest son, and said, "Who's that chopping down trees in my wood?" Well, this young man, this young warrior, he was so scared at this big troll, he dropped his axe on the floor and left his leather sack with the cheese and bread in, half eaten, and ran off. And got back to the longhouse, where his father was sitting in his good old chair at the back of the longhouse, in front of the hearth. And he said, "What are you all doing back?" He said, he looked all scared. He said, oh, Dad, Father, he said, I was in that wood and a massive troll came, and I couldn't fight a troll like that. So I ran off. And his father said, "I'm ashamed of you, son. If I was half the man I am now, I would have got my axe and fight the troll to the death, and I would have won as well." And no doubt he would have done, because his father was a mighty warrior back in the day. And he said, "Son, I'm ashamed of you. I gave you a job to do, and you can't even fight a troll." Some hours passed, and then this old Norse warrior shouted his second son. And he said, "Son, I want you tomorrow morning, grab your favourite axe. I want you to go off in the wood and continue chopping down the trees and making the logs." And, his son said, "All right, I'll do that, father." So the next day, again, he got up when the sun was rising in the morning, and his mum gave him another bag with cheese and a bit of bread. And he went off. He walked for a few hours. He came to the wood. He went through the wood, and he came to the clearing, and he saw the trees that his older brother had been chopping down with a good axe. And I love a good axe. Oh, yes. You've got to be a Norse warrior to be able to do that. And so he started chopping down some trees. He sat down on a log. He was hungry and greedy. Ate all the cheese and all the bread. Within half an hour or some time in the morning. And again, a few hours passed. He managed to chop down a few more trees, make a few more logs. But then suddenly, in the distance, he heard the thud, thud, thud noise. And the trees started to wave and move. And then they parted. And the massive troll, with a big bulbous nose and big eyes and spots all over his face and big ears, wearing furs and very few clothing, and had a big wooden club in his hand. He said, "Who's that? Hewing and chopping down trees in my wood, in my forest?" Well, the middle son was so scared, he dropped his axe and ran back home to the longhouse to his father. And he came back home, and he came in the longhouse looking all scared. Oh, said father, he said, I was in the wood and the troll came. He said, "Son, why did you not fight the troll? You got an axe." And I said, "Oh, I couldn't fight a troll like that. He's ginormous." He said, "I'm ashamed of you, son. If I was half the man I am now, I would have fought that troll, and I would have killed him with one good blow of the axe. But you, son, I am ashamed of you." And so the old Norse warrior didn't know what to do. Well, he only had two sons, but then he remembered that he had Dave, the Viking cat, staying with him. And he says, "Dave," called Dave over. He said, "You've been here for a couple of years now, living with us. And I see you, Dave, as one of my children. You have brought us great luck. And I think it's an honour to have you, Dave, here with us. And I want you, Dave, in the morning, to grab an axe and continue chopping the wood for us. Because if we don't pay our debt off, we'll lose a lot of our land. And it will be an honourable thing for you to save us, to help us, to repay the debt you owe us for putting you up." And well, Dave, stood there saying, "Oh, that's not a problem. I will do that for you. Oh, yes. Oh, and don't worry about the troll." He said, "I'll sort the troll out as well," said Dave. And bearing in mind, human beings are tall and cats are tiny. But he was not scared. He had the courage of a cat, the bravery of a Viking Norse cat. And so the next morning, he went to a rack where they got all these axes, and he found an axe he liked. So, "Yeah, I like this axe. I could chop down some trees with this." And he went over to see the man's wife. And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Dave. I've run out of cheese and I've run out of bread. But I do have some cheese I'm making at the moment." And it was a whey of cheese, a ball of cheese. And so she gave him a special bag, what he called a script bag. It was a watertight bag because the cheese was all wet. It was still settling. So just take this cheese with you, and then when you want to eat it, just squeeze the water out, and then you can eat all the cheese you want. And of course, cats love a bit of cheese. And so he got the bag, and he put the whey of cheese in the bag. And because the bag was watertight, it did not leak. And he got his axe he liked, and he started to walk over. He got a nice cloak on his shoulder, wearing a little red hat. It's Egil made him many years ago. And, this is going to be his last year in Norway. For the end of the year, end of the season, before the weather turns, he's going to go back home. Because, he's missing Northworthy. And want to see his father, Egil, and his uncles, Bragi and Egil. And so, Dave came to the wood. He walked through the wood and came to the clearing. And on the ground, he saw 2 axes and 2 leather bags. He thought, well, this is where there was chopping the woods down, and there was all these big logs on the floor, and Dave was super fast because he was magical. So before he knew it, he chopped down loads of trees and made loads of logs. And he was also super strong. I mean, Dave was so strong, he must have the strength of Thor himself. And he had little Thor's hammer around his neck. Perhaps that gave him the strength. And perhaps he had it from Thor himself, because Dave had met Thor and had been on adventures with Thor, because the gods, the Norse gods, have heard about Dave. And Thor being Thor, a very great fatherly figure and a strong character, not like Loki, who's devious. He hung out with Dave now and again, and they both went on adventures. And so, chopping down logs, and Dave had forgotten all about the troll at this point. Then suddenly, he heard the thud noise. And the trees started to move and shake. And then out, of the parting when the trees parted, with two mighty hands, a troll appeared. And he looked down and said, "Who's this? Hewing and chopping down trees in my wood, my forest?" And Dave stood there brave. He said, "It's me. I'm Dave the Viking Cat." "Dave the Viking Cat," said the troll. "Well, you shouldn't be in my wood, chopping down trees." And the troll had a big wooden club. And he said, "I'm going to bash you with my club. And then that's the end of you lot chopping down my trees." And it was an ugly troll, some of the trolls are really ugly, but this one was the ugliest troll around. Well, not only was Dave a brilliant fighter, because it's great to have that fighting ability, and we always say which is the best weapon you carry, he was also a super smart. For his brain, his thinking was his best weapon. And he suddenly remembered that on the ground he had the leather script bag with the cheese in it. And so, as I get a splinter in my hand from my axe, he got the leather bag and he pulled out the whey of cheese, a massive ball of cheese. He'd been busy chopping down trees all morning and afternoon. He forgot to eat it. And he started to squeeze it and squeeze it. He said, "If you come near me," said Dave, said, "I'll do this to your head." And he squeezed it until all the water came out. And the troll, being stupid, thought it was a rock. He said, "I'll squeeze this rock, just like I'll squeeze your head in a minute, and all your brains will come out, and then you won't be alive anymore." And well, the troll was horrified. "Oh," said the troll, "oh, I'm not going to fight you if you're going to squeeze my head like that stone, because I've never seen anybody in my life squeeze water out of a stone, and that terrifies me," said the troll. And the troll said, "I'll tell you what," he says, "why don't we both chop down trees and make logs? At the end of the day, because I always need logs for my cave and my fire, we can split the logs and you can go on your way if you promise not to kill me and squeeze water out of my head." Of course, the troll being a troll, he didn't know he had brains, but he did have brains in his head. And he didn't want them being squashed out. So Dave said, "All right." He got his paw out and they both shook hands on it. And all afternoon, they chopped down trees. And they made a really good team. The troll being massive could lift all the big logs. And Dave being super fast with an axe could, chop all the logs up into logs. And all afternoon and into early evening, they chopped logs. But it was getting dark. It was getting late in the evening. And soon it will be dark. Well, the troll said, "Well, it's getting a bit dark, Dave." We called him Dave by this time. And said, "Well, why don't you come back to my cave and I'll put you up for the night and we could have some porridge." "Oh, well," Dave said, "all right then. I'll come back with you." And so Dave and the troll went back to the troll's cave, a few leagues deep in the forest near a big rocky outcrop. And Dave and the troll walked in. There was a big entrance. Of course, Dave looked tiny in the entrance. And he saw all these chests and in the middle was a big hearth, with a wooden frame about it and a big metal chain above it hanging from the ceiling. And the troll said, "Right," said Dave, "here's a kettle, here's a cauldron. Take that down to the river down there and bring back some water." Well, Dave knew that the troll was testing him. I didn't want to feel embarrassed by saying, "Well, that's too big for me." So Dave said, "No, I'll tell you what, Mr. Troll, why don't you take the kettle, the cauldron, to the river, and you bring back the water? And I see over there you got a massive sack of wheat, and I'll get the wheat ready, and we can put it and make the porridge." And so the troll agreed. "So all right, I'll be back in half an hour, Dave. I'll be back here, before the sun sets. I'll be back with some water." And Dave got a big wooden bowl and started spooning out, the porridge mixture into a bowl. And then the troll came back and he hung the cauldron, the kettle, from a big iron chain over the fire. And of course, in those days, in the medieval age, you always kept your fire going because it's important to keep your longhouse, or in this case, your troll cave, warm. Because let's face it, we all like to be warm, don't we? And even trolls like to be warm. And so, they started boiling the water, and then Dave poured in the porridge mixture, and the troll started to spoon it around and mix it all in. And before they knew it, they had a massive cauldron full of porridge. But then the troll said, "I'll tell you what, Dave, why don't we have a competition to see who can eat the most porridge? And if you eat more porridge than me, then I will let you go safe tomorrow morning and not bash you when you're asleep with my big club." And so this is what Dave agreed to. They both got a wooden bowl the same size, and when the porridge was done, the troll put out a bowl of porridge each, and they both ate it at the same time, same speed. And then again they had another bowl and another bowl and another bowl. Now, I'm sure you agree there's a bit of a flaw in this plan when it came to Dave, because Dave was a little tiny cat and the troll was as big as a tree, and no doubt he could eat more porridge than Dave. But Dave, again, using the best weapon he had, his brain, remembered that he had his little bag on him. So when the troll wasn't looking, he was spooning the porridge into his bag. And another bowl later, because Dave already was full up at this moment. He's had that much porridge he couldn't eat anymore. And so he thought, well, yeah, when the troll's not looking, I'll just pour it into my pouch. And he had the pouch in front of him on his stomach like this. He had a cloak over it so he could hide it. All right, the troll's not looking. I'll pour another bowl of porridge in. So I finished my bowl, said Dave, the Viking Norse cat. And again, the troll kept up with him. And he had another bowl. And again, Dave poured it into his sack. And I'm sure you agree, that's a brilliant plan. But again, this plan's got a flaw, because that's a leather sack, a leather shoulder bag, and this is a script bag, a watertight bag. So the porridge wasn't leaking out the bottom, it was staying in there, could only hold so much. And so, Dave, thought, what am I going to do? I could probably get another 2 or 3 more bowls in there if I'm lucky, and then I'm going to be in a situation where what am I going to do then? I don't want to have my brain bashed in. "Oh, great axe, man," somebody says. "Oh, it is, sure is." There you go. And he says, and you're thinking about it. This is a live stream telling some Dave the Viking Cat stories. And this is a story called Dave the Viking Cat and the Troll. But then Dave remembered that on his boat he had a good old sea axe. A bit like this one, but a bit more smaller. And I must say, that there is a lovely sea axe, and is razor sharp. In fact, I got a nasty scar on my hand from this many years ago when I was at Westow, Anglo-Saxon village. I cut myself cutting some bread. And so Dave thought to himself, I know what. I'm going to get my leather bag. I'm going to cut a slit in it at the bottom, and then all the porridge when the troll was not looking, will fall out. And this is what he did. He got his sack, and when the troll was distracted, quickly cut a slit in the bag. Of course, I'm not going to do it now because I quite like my bag not to have a slit in it. And so that's what Dave did. And he continued eating. And the troll was amazed. He says, "I said, I've had a few eating competitions in my life, and I've never had anybody in my life keep up with me. I thought I was the best eater in all the known world." And then Dave explained and said, "Well," he says, "I got a bit of a secret I can eat." And at first he didn't tell the troll, but the troll said, "Oh, come on, Mr. Dave, come on, Dave, tell us a story." And then Dave showed him the sack, but the troll thought it was Dave's stomach. I said, "What I've done, troll, I've got a knife and I cut a nice slit in the bottom of my belly, so that when I eat, it all comes out. That means I can eat more." Well, the troll thought, "Whoa, this is a brilliant idea." So very quickly, the troll got a massive knife and he cut a slit at the bottom of his belly. But then, of course, all of his guts came out and the troll died a slow death. That was the end of the troll, but not the end of the story. Now Dave, being a clever cat, he thought, well, yeah, I've now beat that troll, and the troll's dead, and there's loads of boxes around here, and what's in them, he says. So, he started to go around the chests, and, there was a chest a little bit like this one there, and it was full of gold. And Dave was super strong. He could just about lift anything, but he could not lift this treasure chest. He thought, well, if I take this back to the longhouse, to the old Viking, give it to him, that's all his debt sorted, and, I've done a good job. But Dave wasn't greedy. If he found treasure, he would share it out. But then he remembered a story he was told by Anglo-Saxons about sometimes trolls will have magical chests which are enchanted so that you cannot lift them. But he remembered that if you got some iron and threw it in the chest, it would dispel the magic and he'd be able to lift the chest and carry it back home. So this is what he did. He got his sea axe and he threw it in the chest, and very quickly the iron dispelled the spell and the magic, and he was able to carry that gold and all that silver, jewellery and coins back. When he got back to the longhouse, and he showed him the chest of gold, he was carrying it on his little cat shoulders. I mean, I think I would struggle to carry it, but Dave, being super strong, he could carry this chest. And he showed him, "Look at this I found." He said, I met the troll and told him all the story about having an eating contest and going back to the troll's cave. And in the cave he found a magical axe as well, which he took home with him as a souvenir, and gave the gold away. And then a few months later he came back to England and came back to good old Northworthy, and in the long hall we all sat round one night and Dave told us this story, and this is the story that Dave told to me, and I hope you've enjoyed this story, for it is true. Yes, we've got CC 2020 CC 2224 says great axe. Yeah, it's a very nice axe. It's a lovely hand forged one, and it's got a nice shape to it, and I'm sure you agree that is a lovely axe. And I've got another one here which is a bit more medieval, post Anglo-Norman. This would be made from good quality iron, and it's a combat axe, so the reason why it doesn't have a point is basically because it's blunt, so you could use it in combat, and it's slightly heavy, to be fair, and you can tell it's been used a lot because you look at the wood and the shaft where it's been whacked by swords, and it's got a lovely handle. But then this is the axe I lost in the garden, and I used to love this axe and used it for chopping wood, and I did manage to slightly break the handle when I was using it against a tree, and because I left it out through this winter time, it made the wood brittle. So don't leave your axes outside in the winter time, because the winter will dry the wood. And yeah, and it's got a bit of a ring to it. I don't know who made this one, but it's got to be 30 to 40 years old. So it's vintage Viking. And same with this one as well. Both of these came from Turkey. Of course, this one's been left in my garden for winter, and it's got rusty, and I've not got to the stage where I polished it back up yet. And then we've got different designs of axes. So we can go to the Francisca, and this needs a new handle, because this is the handle I got it with, but it's really rubbish, and it's not the best designed axe, because this is a laser cut axe which has been profiled, and then somebody's heated it up and knocked the shape round and welded it together. So it's a cheaply made axe. I'd love to have a Francisca actually forged, rather than actually the way it is. So perhaps Sam could make me one, and I'll pay you, Sam. Send it from Texas. I'll give you some designs, and you can tell it's been laser cut, because a proper hand forged one wouldn't have this cutting here. It'll be tapered off and have a lot more meat at this end, and it's also slightly off centre as well. And I dropped the axe on the floor. So be careful when you drop axes. Oh, that hurt. I'll be limping around there. Ooh. But let's not worry about that. So yeah, Francisca, good throwing axe, but I need to make a new handle, and then this handle I will incorporate on something else. That really hurt, that did. Ouch. I'll be limping to the pub in a minute. And then we've got a working T-shaped axe. This is a copy of the one from the Kayak Hoard. This is a 8th century, I think, or 9th century hoard. Which a load of tools were found. And as I, stand on my foot because I hurt myself. And so that's another nice axe. Again, would you use this in battle? Most probably not. But if that's the only axe you got in your longhouse, and you got a spear, then yeah, some of them will be smithed, but a lot of these are put together. So again, that's been put together, and you can see, if you see this line here, you can see this different sort of rust. That's just the sign of the welding, where it's been welded together. So it would have been a sheet, it would have been cut out, maybe laser cut, or maybe it would have been ground out in shape, and then they've gone round and forged it on. Or you could, alternatively, you could get a round section tube and then make the axe shape. And then, so maybe on this one, if you look, it's on both sides. You probably can't see it. I can. You can just see the darker line here. That's the welding, because it's going to have a slightly different quality of metal. Yeah, you can see it there, look. So what they've done, they've got a tube section and knocked it out in shape, and then they just welded on this blade here. And then it's the same with this one. This has also been cut out on probably a laser or plasma machine, because because I can tell, being an engineer, that they haven't ground this away to make it look like it's not been laser cut out. So I can tell, because it's got little lines going down from the plasma or laser cutting, because I used to work on a laser machine. And again, they lasered out the whole profile. They've then heated it up and bent it over. And then you can see here, this bit of metal, you can see it's slightly different. That's the welding. And it's slightly got a line to it. So it's not been done brilliantly. But the guy who makes these is a really good craftsman. But he doesn't make them to the point where they're really usable. They're just mostly for display. But yeah, so it's not being hand forged in the sense of from a raw piece of ingot. It's just been, put together. And then let's have a look. I've got another interesting one here, which is much later, but I'd love to know what this is for. A double-headed axe. This would probably be a 19th century axe. What would you use that for? Anybody know? And I did polish it up at some point, and I think I bought it at a car boot for £1 or something like that. And I could convert it, chop one of the ends off, and cut into here and make it more of a bearded axe. But I kind of feel like it would be a shame to do that. But if anybody knows, and leave a comment what this axe is for. I mean, it'd be great for chopping, a chicken's head off. And again, that's an actually blacksmith forged one that's been properly made. Let's have a look. Then we have this axe here, which is a properly hand forged one as well. So this is what a proper Viking or Anglo-Saxon axe should look like, rather than being put together. This has been worked in a forge from an ingot, and it's been got the shape, and they've actually forged it. And you can actually still see. I don't know if anybody recognises this maker's mark. I'd love to know. So it's I think it's some kind of runic inscription, but again, that's quite cool and interesting. And yeah, I made the handle for it, but it's a little bit too tapered this way and too curved. It should be curved the other way. So what happens is, because the handle's too curved inside, it's just not giving enough reach. So at some point, I'm going to have to take this off and use this handle on another axe and make a whole entire new axe handle for this one. So yeah, so we do have lots of weapons. Then probably the coolest thing we got is this here, which is a pattern molded early sword. So this will be late Vendel age. Of course, the Vendels are not a people; it's an age. So this is, you know, a Norse blade from Norway, but I think it was made in Denmark in the 1950s, what I was told. And Paul Binns, the famous swordsmith, found it in the back of a blacksmith workshop, all rusty to hell. But he saw enough in it that he saw then and there that it was a pattern molded sword. So, you know, he spoke to the blacksmith, who at this point, and this would be probably the 1980s or early 90s, he said, oh yeah, he said, you know, I think his dad made it. So my dad made that in the 1950s, and he went out and got bog iron ore and smelted it because he wanted to make an authentic pattern molded sword from scratch. And the son told him that he spent 600 hours to make this sword. So that's a really expensive sword. And then Paul Binns just saw the blade and managed to buy the blade off him, and then took it back, and he made a pattern molded pommel and a walnut handle, and another there's a pommel, that's the cross guard. And then eventually, I think Turkey bought it off him. I think it was £1,200 in the 90s. So, you know, that's probably a £2,000 to £3,000 sword there. And if I show you a bit closer, you will see the pattern molding. You can also see the steel edge. So it's got a cutting edge as well. I'm sure you agree that there, you can see the pattern molding is a very nice bit of kit. It's got a smaller fuller as well. So yes, so that's another bit of kit. Let's put that back. Then we have a Merovingian Langsax, which is a bit longer, and you could use this in one hand or with two. It's got a very long handle, and it's quite unique. But again, this is probably a laser cut one, and then to just put a handle on it, so it's not been heat treated. But how good it will be in battle, I don't know, because the curve, you know, because all these are meant to have a concave section, you know, like so. If that's 4 mil, should have a 4 mil radius. So that's probably between 3 and 4 millimeters in thickness, and it's got an interesting fuller of just 3 lines that are ground into it. So again, fascinating. And then Leonard says, I have a firefighting axe, heavy, 2 hands. Yeah, I've got 2 of them. I got a World War II one with a wooden handle, and then later on the firefighting axes, and I've all find them and compare them to our axes. Had a rubberized handle, but I definitely got 2 of them in the house, because over the years I've been to car boots. If I see an axe, I think, oh, I'll buy it. So, you know, I've got so many axes, you can never have enough of them. And all good stuff. And my leg's better now, so if you drop your axe on your foot, just be careful, but it will get better. And I'll probably just have a bruise, but I'm a tough old Norse warrior, and that's okay with me. And I think I slightly, from that handle, I slightly got a bit of a splinter in it, because it probably just needs sanding down a little bit, because it's been battered so much, because it's had a lot of battles. You know, you're probably talking hundreds and hundreds of battles, and you could see, you know, how battered this is. I just got a slight splinter from it from somewhere. So I probably just want a bit of sanding down to improve that. but it is a little bit top heavy. I could use it in battle, but I think I prefer to use a more of a lighter axe like Eggle's axe, because it's just a bit more lighter to use. And then CC 2224 says, do you sharpen the axes that you use for everything like cutting? Well, yes, I do. And because, you know, I'm a trained engineer by my trade, I've got a lot of experience using a grinding wheel, so I can grind an axe or a knife razor sharp, you know, once I go over it with a stone. But I wouldn't want to convert them into sharp axes, because these are for combat. And we do get that question a lot. People will say, especially on TikTok, they'll say, oh, why are your axes not sharp? Because these are designed so we can hit shields and hit people with, you know, in a trained and careful manner, you know. And there are 1 or 2 sharp axes down here, but most of them will be blunt. So that used to be a blunt axe, but I sharpened this one. And again, you can tell that's a properly forged one because of the shape of it, rather than the other ones. If you compare it to the Francisca, just look at the different style of head. That's correct. That's been put together. And what I could do, I could, if I get a welding machine, I could roll down here and build up the material, and then I could grind it back down again and try to get more of a shape like that. So you can always tell the difference between a hand forged one and one that's basically been, you know, put together. And of course, this would have started life as an ingot, and then they would have split this and made a hole, and then worked the hole out, and then the head would have formed afterwards. And this is an art form in itself, but you know, there's probably 20 hours of work to make one of these. Whereas there's probably 5 to 10 hours of work, maybe even not that. You know, you could probably, if you're getting that laser cut out, that's going to take you 10 minutes. You'll probably go to an engineering company and they'll do it for you. It probably cost you 20, 30 quid. So, you know, it's probably mass produced as well. And then you'll probably take you half an hour to an hour just to knock the shape round, heat it up on something, maybe a torch, heat it up. So this one here has probably never ever been on a forge, so it's all been done with modern machinery and modern tools, where this one has been. That's been properly forged. And perhaps tomorrow's live stream I will do a video where I talk about weapons. We've done a nice storytelling session today, and they're great because it gives a variety to the live streams. But tomorrow we'll think about doing a more based, looking in depth at some of the weapons I've got. And then, of course, I got a lot more, and I want to get a lot more as well. So Leonard says, beautiful collection, very funny. My mother has a shirt that says, too many idiots, not enough axes. Kid you not. Really, that's a really cool shirt. I love that. That's a really good phrase for a logo for the channel. Yeah, too many idiots, not enough axes. I'll have to remember that. If I remember, I'll write it down, and perhaps we could have that as a logo. I don't think it'll be trademarked. And then CC 2224 says, great collection overall. I really had enough time and energy to dedicate myself to something like that. Well, yes, it does take time to dedicate yourself and to build up a collection. But don't forget, you know, I've been a reenactor for 30 years next year. And I've been doing medieval reenacting, even though I've had times off, like when I was a carer for my late father. I couldn't really get out of the house for 4 or 5 years. And literally, you know, I'd probably about once a week I'd go into town just to do some shopping, and so I was stuck in the arse. So I've had 25 years of collecting stuff. And because I'm a bit of a hoarder, because I don't like selling things, because in the past I've sold things and I've always regretted it. So I now got to the stage in my life where I say no. And people do message me, oh, would you sell me that axe? Would you sell me that helmet? And I'll say, oh, no, I'm saving it for myself. And then now and again, when I go dumpster diving, which go through bins, I find things which are a little bit medieval. So last year or this year, I found this wooden bowl. And I don't know why it's got 3 little cuttings, so I'm going to have to take them off. But this will be a nice, authentic bowl for the Viking era. And it's probably just, you know, an Indian-made bowl. I got no idea why it's got those cuttings. Anybody have a determination why that would have that in it? But I'm going to have to shave them off somehow, and then that'll be a nice authentic bowl. Give it a good clean, and then you could have your medieval stew in it. So yes, I hope you've enjoyed this live stream. I hope you found it to be entertaining. And if you're re-watching it after it's finished live streaming and it's now gone on the channel, and you got to this point in the live stream and you've been here for 1 hour 55 minutes, and you're awesome, and I thank you so much. And the idea of me doing more live streams is more involvement in the channel for you guys, but also for me to build up that important watch time over the next few months, so that I can actually become monetized again and just make a few pounds from the advertising, which won't be too much on the channel, so that I can then get the money from the monetization and buy more axes. So it's all about buying more axes. More axes, less idiots. But yes, I'm going to have to go now, because I'm going out in 5 minutes to my local pub with some friends of mine. And by chance, where I'm going to, called the Hollybush, is being voted the top 25 bars in Europe. And I tell you what, the beer there is superb. And perhaps one day, if they have a Wi-Fi, I'll think about trying to live stream it, and I'll do a little tour if it's not too quiet, because they've got all these tools hanging down, and they've got all these wonderful beers and homemade pork pies, and it's to die for. It really is. It's wonderful. But I'll just carry on for another 3 minutes to get to the 2 hour mark, and then we'll go. So yeah, we've got lots of things to talk about and lots of things to do on the channel. And I do have a musket here, by the way. But this is not a whittle one. This is a wall hanger. This is the Enfield, but it's just a wall hanger. It just hangs on your wall. I mean, this is really crap metal. If I get my axe and knock it a little bit, it will break. So this is one you can just buy online to hang on the wall. It should, go like that on your wall. That was from the days when I did American Civil War reenacting. So yes. So I hope everybody's had a good day. Do go and check out the video I put out at 6 o'clock. It's having a close-up look at two swords. I can't find them. They're in here somewhere. It's probably in my chest, to be fair. And do give the video a like and watch that. And tomorrow I'm going to hopefully film another video for my... I'm making a series of videos about mental health and the various aspects, because the audience on here is mainly male dominated, and let's face it, a lot of young men have quite a few problems in life, so let's just make something positive to help them. So tomorrow I'm going to be filming a video on self-care. I'm talking about that for 20 minutes. And then back on Monday, we're back to the Day of the Cat videos, and you'll be watching more Day of the Cat videos from Monday to Thursday. So watch out for them. Normally they'll be out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That's when my peak audience is online. I'm still experimenting with time. Today's video would have been out at 5 o'clock, but I thought I published it and scheduled it, but I didn't. I probably forgot to save the video. So yes. And I can't wait. Probably in 20 minutes I'll be having a pint in my hand, and I'll be necking that, going, oh, that's lovely. Probably a pint of Heartyton ale, or maybe a pint of the homebrew ale they make in the pub. And then when I get back, I'll have something to eat, because I literally, since Thursday, and today's Saturday, I've had nothing to eat really, apart from some crisps and a cake and a few little bits. Because I've just been so busy, I've just not managed to cook any food. So I may have steak and chips when I so I am working on the merchandise. I did start a shop this week, but because I listed the shop in America and I can't change it, I got to do the old process again and start all over again next week. So just bear with me. We've gone off and we've gone back live. It's because it knows I'm going. That's Loki for you, and the gods say, come on, Bragi, it's now time to go to the pub, and I've got 20 seconds to go. 20 seconds to go. 20 seconds to go. It's going to be a live stream tomorrow afternoon, or maybe in the evening to do. 10 seconds to go. 10 seconds to go. Going to the pub to get some beer tonight. Yay! There's an impromptu song for you there for you. And now it's 2 hours ongoing, so goodbye. Thank you. I love you guys to bits. I really do. You're the best audience a Norse warrior could have. And thank you for liking the video. And do watch this video after the live stream. Goodbye from me. Goodbye from Bragi.